Oh, good evening. Hello. Welcome. Kia ora whānau. Welcome. Haere mai. Hey, Chewy.
Hi.
Doing well, my son? Doing well? Doing good?
Some minor technical difficulties, but I think we're good.
I think the system that we're using, right, for people who want to know, this is really boring inside the house kind of conversation. It's called StreamYard. And I often leave my speakers on by accident and you can't hear the feedback. So if your headphones do cock out, like if I put my speakers on now, like my speakers are on now and I can probably hear you talk to me.
Roger that, Millie Vanilli Chili Willy.
You're coming through my speakers now without headphones on. So if there's a problem, just put your speakers on and we'll go from there. Kia ora whānau. Welcome back to another edition. Hey, it's one of those days again. We talked a bit last night about not having a lot to talk about because of what's going on in the news. The news was the weather. We are going to pretty much talk a bit about that tonight. There is another conversation which happened on News Talk ZB this afternoon, Heather Duplessis Allen's show, which kind of was about the price of food. And it's the one, in America, the Republicans have a problem because gas prices are coming down. And they've been banging on for 2 years about under President Biden, gas prices are a horrific price. And so now, because they've been going on about that for so long, now that petrol prices, being American, gas prices, petrol prices are coming down in America, sort of to the point they were around the pandemic. They've lost that. The GOP has lost that as an arrow in its quiver. Is that the right way around? It's the arrow in the quiver? I think it's right. The quiver and the arrow? Yeah. And the cost of living and food prices is a bit the same for national here in New Zealand. So we're going to have a listen, I think, to a bit of a conversation. And the reason I say I think is because there's a lot to kind of get through tonight and watch about the weather. But my plan is to get to this conversation with an ANZ economist on News Talk ZB this afternoon, where the summary was, it's not as bad as we expected. Compared to the rest of the world, we're doing pretty good. There are, what does she call them? Supply shocks that are increasing the prices of food at the moment. In other words, nothing to do with really the government. You can't really blame Jacinda, although some of the church try to.
I think you can. You still.
Or for the war in the Ukraine.
If you want to anchor it in reality.
Yeah,
or,
sure.
Or whether you go, it's election year.
But here's something I want to do. This is completely tangent number one for the night, yeah? And it really comes down to this idea of the politicians we have around the world at the moment. And I'm thinking about Biden, I'm thinking about Trump, and I'm thinking about old floppy here in Australia, and all these politicians we have in New Zealand. This came across my YouTube feed today. This has nothing to do with the news of the day, but I want to play it because it's like this little reminder to how we used to think about and the politicians we used to have in the world a mere 6 years ago, 5 years ago. Just have a look at the story. Just have a look. Just have a look at the story and think about politicians or a particular politician then versus what we're looking at around the world today.
Voting is not only a civic duty, it can be fun, a chance to socialize with your neighbors. Well, watch as Mike Jones takes that chance with one of his neighbors during early voting in Chicago. Yes, that was Mike Jones.
So the guy walks past the president early voting, says, "Don't touch my girlfriend."
His hands off his girlfriend, Aya Cooper.
I really wasn't planning on it.
I am sorry. Please excuse me.
Now, there's an example of a brother just embarrassing you for no reason.
Embarrassing.
Just for no reason whatsoever.
I knew he was going to say something smart, but I didn't know what he was going to say.
And now you'll be going back home and talking to your friends about that lady.
And it's just this interaction between two human beings, one of them being the most powerful person on the face of the planet, because the boyfriend of the girl there made a joke to the president about "don't touch my girlfriend." And of course, because he was one of the coolest men on the face of the planet, President Obama finishes it in a particularly classy way.
Resist a parting shot.
You're gonna kiss him, give him something to talk about.
Let me give you a kiss and give him something to talk about. And I know this has completely got nothing to do with the news at all, but that came across my feed today, and I just went, "Oh my gosh." Do you remember politicians we're not talking about the 1960s when they had style points, but just a little while ago when they weren't all like dumpster fires. I just wanted to play it and kind of say, reminisce for a couple of seconds.
Well, I think we kind of touched on that a little bit last week when I said something positive about Reagan and Bush, because when you view some of those guys which we write off as right-wing demons, through today's lens, and then you go back and you look at them, you go, oh, actually, yeah, all right, they're certainly guilty of a whole bunch of stuff, but I think their reasoning was a lot more solid than it was than the equivalent has today. It's strange.
Yeah, it's just bizarre. Anyway, Gareth's put a comment in our thing, Chewy. You're welcome to bring that up and share that if you want, because I have no idea what that commentary is about. So I don't have that queued up to do.
So I'm going to go hunt for it right now.
And I'm just looking at Lloyd Burr's show, and there's no links to a conversation with David Seymour. So what I will say to you, Gareth, is rather than trying to do a half-assed job today, I mean, most of our show is a half-assed job, but rather than doing an actual half-assed job today, maybe what we'll do is we'll look for that for tomorrow and see what it was all about. I'm actually on Today FM tomorrow at 4:35 in their panel. So we will have a look at that and see what it's all about, so we can bookmark that to come back to tomorrow. Before we kickstart the show proper, I want to say a big thank you to all our patrons and our patrons who are loved a lot, loved. And we're going to do a new thing now. Rather than running some of the names across the bottom of the screen, say thank you when we can, and we will. Each show we would like to put your names up and put the level of patron that you are at. And as you can see, Alex and Kuki, who are our producers, our super patron is Simple. Our patrons are Carl, Christine, Gareth, Graham, Jonty, Kin, Liz, Mark, Pat, Raywin, Rowena, Scott, Stephen. Our fuel level are Lady Power, Michael, Peter, Rob, and our coffee runners are Adam, AJ, Fiona, KJS, Mike, Richard, Simon, and Susan. So there are patrons at the moment. If you'd like to get involved and come support some of the work we do, you can very easily do that by heading to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. And you will be proud to know, Chewy, gosh, if I just shut that down, I just might have lost everything. No, I didn't. You'll be proud to know that I finally, Chewy, got in there and redesigned the Patreon page to be up to date Monday and Tuesdays at 9 p.m.
Look at that.
Patreon.com/Big Hairy News. So thanks for being
Very
involved,
nice.
you lot, and we appreciate you. So I've got something I'm going to play for you as well. It's a bit of a tangent as well, but again, it's one of these things I've come across to do with the Super Bowl. Get to that in a second. Is there anything else we want to address from the chat, or before we want to kick off the show proper there, Chewy?
Don't know. Kick into it.
All right. You a fan of Breaking Bad?
I was late to that show, but then devoured it once
Yeah.
I got over the fact that everybody was watching it.
I've watched it twice and love it to bits. And I wanted to show you an advert that played on the Super Bowl yesterday, New Zealand time. And unfortunately, we hear a lot about the Super Bowl advertising. Yeah, we hear about how the halftime show with Rihanna is the biggest thing in the world every year, and the adverts that they play at halftime are all worth like $2, $3, $4, $5 million for a 30-second slot. The truth behind it, what happens more often than not, it's a bunch of sad old has-beens. Like here's one with John Travolta and the guys. I never watched Scrubs, but the two guys from Scrubs doing there you go. So it's just absolutely awfully horrible, celebrities kind of who can't get work go and do it there. This was an interesting one with what's her name from Clueless. She kind of reprises her role 25 years later, and it's all right. She does okay, but with no disrespect, she is kind of looking the age a little bit, but you have to say Alicia Silverstone looking pretty good, still looking pretty good, not taking too much away from her, but does like a Clueless spoof as well. It was the year of the spoof. However, one of them was spectacular. It was a play on a movie, and it was a play on Breaking Bad, and I want to play it for you. And I'm assuming this won't get us kicked off YouTube because it's an advert and we're playing their advert for them. So I'm assuming it will be all good. But if you're a fan of Breaking Bad, I think one of the reasons this works is they don't look like they've aged 40 years. So it still was kind of believable. Let me play it for you and then get your reaction.
Yo, These are the bomb.
And they're air popped, not fried.
Popcorners. You're an artist.
Actually, Jesse, it's just basic ingredients. No, we don't eat our own supply.
Mr. White.
Jesse.
Everyone's going to want to taste. And I know just the guy to talk to.
What are these?
We call them popcorners.
Say their name. Popcorners.
Take! Yeah! How much of this stuff do you have? We've got 6 signature flavors, Joe.
7! You make 7!
7
works. Popcorners. Break into something good.
We're gonna eat a lot of snacks together.
So confirm with me that's one of the greatest adverts that you've ever seen.
That's a pretty good ad.
It's a pretty good ad, eh?
That's a pretty good ad. Yeah. I mean, you can tell when things are trying too hard.
Yep.
And I think the first two, well, definitely the first one you put on was, oh my God, they spent a lot of money for something super, super average. But it's pretty clear that those guys enjoyed revisiting that role.
Yeah. Yeah. So very much so. And so I just wanted to play it again. It's one of these things, probably for tonight. There's one big news story for the night. And I thought we'll throw a couple other things in there. And that's one that I wanted to play you. So speaking
does
of
that count? Well, I mean, it was Superbowl. So that counts as sport.
That's news.
Right.
Yeah, that's news. So we've done sport,
So
followed.
news,
You're right.
sport,
Yeah.
and the weather.
Yeah, weather. So that means the news was Obama, the sport was the Super Bowl, and now it's the weather.
Yeah, nice.
Weather.
So professional.
I think what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at there's a few things to do with what's happening with the weather, right? And then there is some stories, to make Wayne Brown, the mayor of Auckland, look like the better choice. You have to do something pretty ridiculous. Let me introduce you shortly to Leo Molloy. We'll do that in a bit. But first, let's just have a look at some of the stories that have been going around. I think I've got 3 stories we're going to play. They're all about 2 or 3 minutes each to see what's happened with the weather in case you haven't seen it. A couple from One News, one from News Hub. This is the news reports from Cyclone Gabrielle today.
A town overwhelmed by water. The cyclone dumping more than Whangarei's roads, backyards and Central River could handle. It sparked high tide evacuation warnings for Riverside residents, but some weren't budging.
I don't think the water's going to come up much higher than this, not today anyway.
We're at high tide, and as you can see, we know we need a house.
But her waterlogged neighbour complied.
She's very low down, and her yard is flooded. And she was flooded last night as well.
Other Northland residents had no choice. This couple forced to evacuate after less than a month in their new home. The deluge no match for even the experts. The fire service are told the owners to evacuate because they simply can't pump away this much water. And compounding the problem of so much rain is the stream over the back fence that's now running 3 times higher than normal. This tree fell where one local usually parks her car. Northeast of Whangarei, this farmland unrecognisable.
Those are our paddocks. One boat might come in handy.
There is floods happening. It usually takes a week of dry weather and that all recedes.
And further north, it's been less about the water.
It really is the winds of the cyclone that are causing havoc across the far north.
The sheer force of the gusts bringing down a gum tree on this kiri home.
So all that wind last night caused quite a bit of damage on the power network. A lot of trees down across lines.
As of this afternoon, the battered north had made the most calls for help. The fire service recording 91 incidents across the region in 12 hours.
But mostly, the resilient community in Northland are getting through this.
The positive is that we're okay. My husband and I are okay. My other family members are all okay.
It's just nature.
Hardy Northland locals continuing to take it all in their stride.
And Nicole's with us now live. Kia ora, Nicole. More parts of the region cut off tonight.
I don't think we'll go into the bits when they then have commentary on what we've just seen. Let's have a look at Hawke's Bay, decimated by Cyclone Gabrielle.
escape. Buildings turned into islands as workers made their way to the roof with a mattress for transport. While across town, it was animals in trouble. Good Samaritans stopping to rescue these sheep from a watery grave.
How many sheep do you think you moved just then? Oh, probably 100, 150. He's probably got 20 dead down here. So, not good. Not a good day for the farmer.
But it was along the banks of the rivers that the worst damage was done. A raging torrent ripping this bridge in two, leaving traffic in chaos as authorities recommend thousands of evacuations. The waterway so swollen it separated the two main townships in the bay, closing all bridges along the Narururu River, cutting off Napier on one side and Hastings on the other.
I've never seen it this high. It's pretty frightening, to be honest.
All while flooding inundated a major substation, cutting power to thousands of homes and cutting down the mobile network.
Managing expectations realistically to get full supply restored. It may take weeks. We don't know yet until we get eyes into the substation.
Few places escaped, the devastation stretching all the way to the coast.
There's a car on my beach. It was here when I got up this morning, but now it's gone. It's gone back into the sea. That's how strong it is.
While some city streets became canals. Well, this is a common scene across Hawke's Bay. Streets completely flooded like this one. Residents deciding to wait it out. Many locals facing the same difficult choice, to stay or go.
My husband's not keen, but yeah, we're just waiting to see how it goes.
Some taking matters into their own hands to stop damaging waves from cars.
Getting into other people's houses. So, yeah, tried blocking off the street just to help everybody else out.
And with no power, no phones, no internet.
So that is our biggest challenge as we speak, to get those lifeline communications back up and running.
The situation remains highly uncertain.
And
there you go. Now, I guess that's one of the things. There's a couple of things. There's another one we want to watch from News Hub as well. We'll do that in a second, though. Because you made a noise there, Chewy. And Josie has also made a comment about it. Do you want to speak to this? You might have done a bit more reading on this than I have.
Yeah, absolutely. So that first clip of people.
Do you want me to bring up that link that you put through to the private chat?
Yeah, actually, that was from the Radio New Zealand story on
it. I'll do that.
So those are some RSA workers working in the orchards and fruit pickers and that sort of thing from the islands. They're on top of the cabins that they would be normally living in.
And looking at those pictures are up to the top of the window frame. Yep, so that's 6 foot. That's 6 foot up the cabins, and you got to probably assume that the cabins are off the ground. So that's probably 8 feet of water, probably.
Now they were on the roofs of those cabins without rescue from 8 in the morning through until about 3 or 4 o'clock this afternoon.
Wow!
At no point did their employer try and do anything that I have come across, and it's taken a lot of pressure from a Tongan representative in the area to finally get helicopter rescue earlier this afternoon. We bring these guys in to do this work, this desperate, when during the lockdown, the guys that ran the orchards, and we need these workers, and we treat them like absolute shit, and this is just more proof of that. Like, I'm just so furious. Yep, go for it.
Yeah. So stuck on the roof. For people who are listening to the audio, it's just a video of them stuck on the roofs of the cabins. Live streaming, 450 people watching at this point. 475. Gosh.
Yeah. So where's their employer? What was he trying to do?
I mean, I guess because you know me, I'm a little bit introspective on this. Let's wait to see where he was. Who knows if he was not trapped somewhere else doing something else. I'm not saying to defend him. So once we have all the information, that's when I'll choose whether it's let's crucify him or not. But yes, it's a good question to be asking.
I mean, they get paid low wages. They get their ticket clipped for their accommodation. They've got to pay for all of that. Yeah. And then when this happens, they're just left literally on their roofs waiting for someone to come and rescue them.
I wonder why. I mean, let's not give the orchard owner a pass, but I wonder why, if they're sitting there with phones, the emergency services, because you could call the emergency services 111 yourself. They weren't just, if you were live streaming, then you had connection. I wonder why they were sitting there for that long, whether the orchard owner was involved or not.
Yeah, well, there was
phoning 111 and saying we're on the roof. I just wondering out loud.
Yeah. There was a lot of talk on Twitter throughout the day about these guys. So, I mean, people knew that they were there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. So the question is why? Why did they stay there, and why weren't they helped? And where was the ball dropped? There's the owner of the orchard, the employer to think about. There is the rescue service to think about. There's the emergency services to think about. And I guess we need to know the answers to all those questions so we can apportion blame appropriately.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I think it just crystallizes on the fact that the way we treat RSE workers is not good enough in my mind.
I also think that this is a perfect time to have a conversation around climate change. Let's not do what the Americans do after a mass shooting. This is not the time to talk about gun laws. It's like, actually, this is the time to talk about, climate change and what's going on. I wonder. I was watching a John Campbell piece on One News tonight as well, and he was in Gisborne, and he basically said the people around here are now asking, is this just going to be the way it is from now on? Because I think they said it's their third flood in 2 years or something like that. Is this just going to be the way it is from now on? And so straight away I'm going, okay, so climate change. I was having a chat with someone the other day about climate change, and the person asked me, is there kind of a pro and a con to this? Are these people who are still fighting it? And I get the sense, Chewy, tell me if I'm wrong, that there doesn't seem to be a debate really anymore of, is the climate changing? The only debate that there seems to be between sort of 5% of the population versus 95% is how much do we contribute to it? But everyone's pretty much on board that the climate is changing. Would you say that's a pretty fair summary? But they just haven't quite got on board with why.
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
It's a case of like, almost like, people can't have that much effect. Climate is changing, but it's not our fault.
Yeah.
And nor should we really do anything to mitigate it, because it's bigger than us anyway. And then the other half of it is like, let's do as much as we can, as late as it is, to try and mitigate this. I mean, I'm getting sick of hearing the word unprecedented.
Yeah.
just in general.
It's now become precedented, isn't it?
Yeah, it's got a super big precedent. Yeah.
Can I say as well, of those migrant workers, Rob makes a very fair point. I was thinking this as I was saying it, Rob, as well. When I said they could have called 111, or someone could have, that assumes they know how to do that and what to do. Completely fair. I agree with you. I was thinking that as I was saying it. That's a completely fair point as well. I think that there is, because I've been talking climate change, then global warming for 20 plus years, right? In my work in broadcast media. What I'm saying from my observations is it wasn't very long ago that there were a lot of people ardently going, no, it's not happening. There were books written about it. There was things written about polar bears. It's not happening. My sense now is that has become a really, 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 really tiny, small proportion, and many of the people that were saying no, it's not happening, are now saying yes, it is happening, but some of them still want to debate why. That's the sense I get from this conversation. I think that it's really a moot point though, because as you say, as soon as you say a 99-year flood 3 times in the space of a decade, you kind of go, well, so therefore it's not a 99-year flood anymore. It's become precedented. Yeah. All right, shall we have a look at the News Hub report as well, and then we'll go on and to have a chat about Leo Molloy and everybody's favourite person, Kate Hawksby.
Buki Maiano, welcome back. The Emergency Response Minister says the government is very concerned about Wairoa in Hawke's Bay, which is totally cut off, and there's been no communication.
Officials are planning to send a Defence Force reconnaissance flight when it's safe. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of people remain without power in Northland. Lauren Hendrickson reports.
225,000 people around the country without power.
Waking up underwater. The township urged to evacuate their homes as the Awakino River burst its banks.
Get out the water. He said, no, 5:30. I said, no, water is everywhere. I had the army place all coming from all of Northland.
Dozens of families were forced to seek shelter. Evacuation centres expect another influx as high tide approaches at 7.
We're expecting maybe another 40 people to show up here and maybe another 40 or so up at the high school as well.
On State Highway 1 north of Whangare, a watery graveyard of vehicles after the drivers were forced to flee.
One of the owners returned here today to attempt to retrieve their belongings, but when he got here, he found his vehicle had been broken into and items were missing.
Yeah.
In Onerahi, trees toppled onto roofs. In Ruakaka, roofs were lifted. And if the wind, rain and flooding wasn't enough, a home on the west coast burst into flames after power lines caught fire. The damage to Northland's electricity network labelled catastrophic. 44,000 homes are without power across the region.
Came to town to get some supplies and actually used my phone to get in touch with my partner and little boy, who's up in Kaitaia. They've also got no power either.
Sarah Mason lives in rural Whakaparā and is about to spend her third night without power or cell phone coverage.
We needed supplies. So rush in while we can before any water levels rise again.
But those supplies here at Hikurangi's Foursquare are running low.
Just got the call that our truck has been turned back. They can't get up from Auckland. So we're just running low on everything.
Several roads and state highways in the region have been flooded or closed. Waka Kotahi says communication outages have made it difficult to post updates on where some of them are. As far as the eye can see, farmland is underwater. Former Kaipara Mayor Jason Smith says he's never seen it this bad.
This is going to take days and days to recover from all of this in immediate emergency sense. But beyond that, it will be weeks.
There you go. We're coming to the end of it anyway. And I think not that Mayor's not right about his area, but in general, if a bridge has been washed away in some parts of the country, it's not days and days or weeks, it's months and months and months to get sorted. I just did some numbers while we were watching. 225,000 people, let's say 250,000 round figures, without power in New Zealand today. That's about 5% of the country. Because if there's 5 million of us, 500,000 would be 10%, half of that. So it's about 5%. Could you imagine what the worldwide stories would be if this headline was 17 million Americans without power today? Because that's the equivalent. So it's unbelievably huge. 5% of the population without power.
I mean, using the American analogy there, I can remember when Texas's grid went down during that winter storm, 2 years ago?
Yep.
You know, I think it's certainly around Hawke's Bay and the East Coast and that sort of thing. The other issue, like this has been talked about a little bit with past storms, and I'm sure it'll come up again because at least one of those bridges that I saw getting washed away was getting washed away from the sheer weight of forestry slash.
Right.
That had just been flooded into the river system and pounded up against bridges. And that weight of water and wood just really demolishing that bridge.
Yeah.
Maybe it would have stood without it. Who knows? But yeah, that's something that they need to get on top of because every time there's a flood, forestry slash comes down from the hills and just decimates everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're watching us in the background, I've been running webcams, and you can see actually it's a bit dark now to see all, but there's Hodaki Golf in Auckland. It's not looking too bad. It's interesting. People aren't aware of this. We always talk about it being lighter in the evenings in Otago. There's Auckland right now. There's Central Otago right now. That's the difference. So it's looking a bit calmer, but yeah. It's not good, eh? It's not good. It's only the third time in New Zealand's history that there's been a nationwide state of emergency. And then it was the Christchurch earthquake, COVID, and now. And thinking I know, for example, the Christchurch earthquake, mind you, it was an earthquake, but the building came down because of structural things. But isn't it fascinating that, I think about World War II, I think about other things that have happened, that the 3 times there's been a national state of emergency have been in the last 10 years. I don't know if that says anything, but if it's just, if it's just coincidental, or if it is something to do with what's happening with the planet and the earth and the climate and things right now. I don't want to be all conspiracy theory about the earthquakes, and obviously the climate's got nothing to do with the virus, but it's just ironic that the last 10 years we've seen our only 3 nationwide state of emergencies.
I mean, I was doing a bit of reading and like we've mentioned Cyclone Bowler a couple of times.
Yep.
And just reading on the effects of that, and it doesn't even seem to be in the same league as what we're already seeing out of this one. So yeah, it's certainly interesting.
And the other thing that's been surprising to me about, and this is why we played the weather forecast for you guys last night, the thing that's been surprising is watching the news again tonight. They've talked about this cyclone taking 3 days to get from the top of the North Island to the bottom of the North Island. That's I've never experienced or have heard of a cyclone moving that slowly, and they're still saying tomorrow there'll be more rain. So it's just Chewy. I don't want to say this to you and get you angry, but it's just unprecedented. It's just unfathomable.
I want to see if anyone's checked in on Kate Hawksby.
Shall we check in on Kate Hawksby? Okay, let's have a look at this. This is a story that's that was on News Hub this afternoon, and we'll get to some of the original stuff as well. Cyclone Gabrielle, Kate Hawksby, Leo Molloy under fire for downplaying the storm. On Monday, as the far north was battered by the effects of the cyclone, Kate Hawksby said, let's bring up the text. With all the anxiety-inducing alerts and warnings and breathless media coverage, I'm just wondering where the cyclone is. Let's hope it stays this way. It must be out of the way, maybe. Or stays this way as in not really that rainy. Overcast, light rain, bit windy with a shruggy kind of thing. Hashtag cyclone light. Where are you, Gabrielle? And then we show the footage of the migrant workers on the roofs of 8 feet of water. So that's
what an idiot.
That's what Kate Hawksby came out and did. Much of the feedback to her post was scathing, one sharing the image and asking, do you think Kate has seen the cyclone yet? Which is that one right there, because that was after it obviously hit. Another posted a link to Emergency Management Minister Kieran McCulty's tweet that a state of a national emergency had been declared just after 8:43 a.m. on Tuesday. Hawksby has not since addressed her controversial post, which automatically expired after 24 hours. However, on Tuesday at 3:52 a.m., she posted an image of herself at the News Talk ZB studio captioned, Gabe's arrived in Auckland. Anyway, Leo Molloy also faced scorn over a post he published on Monday, which argued against official advice about the impending national disaster. Here's Leo Molloy's post. Real-time viaduct update. Note the red flag in the distance. Can we make that bigger? There it is. Yeah, that's what he's talking about. The red flag in the distance. Note
Leo Molloy's a walking red flag, to be honest.
Can't raise a flutter. No doubt it's coming, but sure as hell ain't here yet. And the city should not be emasculated, evacuated by false alarms, boys crying wolf. In other words, just to give context to that, I know we all know that, but the boy who cried wolf made up a story that didn't happen. Whereas this advice happened in spades. Anyway, if you're from the CBD, best you get to work, people. So that was Leo Molloy's. And this is what I said earlier, Chewy. It's a pretty special person that can make Wayne Brown look like a better option than this person would have been. Doesn't mean he's a good option. It's like the skinniest kid at fat camp, but he is a better option than Leo Molloy. So well done, Leo Molloy, on, I guess, shining some positive light on that lunatic Wayne Brown. Yep. So there's this tweet. Reaction to his post was swift, with one asking, where did you take that picture at the deck of the Titanic? Another posted an image of Auckland and the power outages around the region, noting the vector outage map shows a different story. Molloy has not responded to people calling out his initial post, which remains published on his Twitter account on Tuesday afternoon. He told News Hub on Tuesday it was sad that people had suffered in the storm, but stood by his original post. Remember, his original post was claiming boy that cried wolf. That was his original post. And that story means you media are telling a story that's not going to happen. He stands by that, though, claiming it was a remark on how eerie the CBD was on Monday. In a more recent post, Malloy made reference to the fact that Muriwai had been affected badly by Gabrielle overnight, and one firefighter was missing after a landslide in the area, with another critically injured. Thoughts go out to all those impacted by Cyclone Gab, especially the firefighter's family, Malloy said. So there you go. There's updates on Leo Molloy and Kate Hawksby, Chewy. And I know you and Leo have a very special relationship, so I could just throw the ball to you, I guess.
Yeah, one day I'll get that account back. I haven't given up. Look, now that he's not running for mayor, can we stop listening, publishing,
True, actually.
He's a random bar owner with a big mouth. Like, he's not some political genius. He's certainly not a meteorologist. It may be the vested interest of someone with a Central City bar asking that people stay in the CBD should be looked at for what it is. Man's an idiot.
Yeah.
He's one of those people that's like rushes down to the beach to see the tsunami come in. You know?
Yeah. He's one of those guys that where if it says like don't eat the poison, he'll go, why not? Is it, don't put
It's
your
this
hand on the
whole thing
electric fence.
of listening to celebrities. It's New Zealand, so you know, Leo Molloy and Kate Hawksby are what we got. Of listening to celebrities rather than just people that are actually telling us what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone would have been able to look at some of those satellite photos of it before it made landfall and going, oh shit. You know, that's what you need, not Kate Hawksby's reckoning that it's not even that windy yet.
I've seen a little bit of commentary, and we should talk about this, Chewy. A little bit of commentary. In fact, I think maybe our mate Karen Plunkett got into this, talking about someone made a comment about the low income and dispossessed people being affected worse by this. And I'm pretty sure I'm paraphrasing, and I could be wrong, but basically saying also, how does floodwater height affect the poor more than the wealthy? And it's like, well, I think about people, and we talked about Kerry Woodham last night, and we're talking about Kate Hawksby tonight, and maybe Leo Molloy as well. If you have the resource to be in a live in an area of town that's perhaps on a hill, that's perhaps better off, that perhaps has better construction, you have the resource to have a full fridge all the time. You can actually stay in your house for 4 or 5 or 6 days because you've got 2 big fridges and a big freezer, because you've got the resource to have that much food around. If you can't quite understand how someone of low income or lesser income can get impacted worse in a natural disaster, then you're just a fucking idiot. Because all of those things, people who live in the worst houses, in the worst areas, in the worst flood zones, are the people who aren't making $1 million a year, or $500,000 a year, or $250,000 a year. They're the people who buy the cheaper houses, and the reason the houses are cheaper is because they're in bad areas for weather, or they're in floodplains, or they're in lower lying areas. And the people who don't live in those areas are wealthier and have more resource to avoid these sorts of things. And I look at people like Leo Molloy, and I hear people like Kate Hawksby, and it was a different topic, but we were talking a bit about Kerry Woodham last night, but around this sort of thing. And I think you privileged fucking wealthy person doesn't understand that actually these people who live in an area in Ranui in West Auckland may be cut off if they're not at home right now, Leo Molloy. And there's a lots of low-lying area out in West Auckland that could be cut off. Yes, you get to drive from probably Central Auckland to Ponsonby, or from Central Auckland to Parnell, which is uphill all the way, and you can get there. Some of these other people can't. You get to do that because you have the money and the ability to do that. Some other people can't. And it just reeks of privilege, wealth privilege. These people coming out going, oh, no big deal, no big deal, as they swan back to their incredibly secure, safe house with double or triple glazing, with 3 stories, with 3 weeks worth of food sitting in. And I'm really, really fucking frustrated by it. I really am. It's not often in these pictures we're seeing of flooded houses, you see 2-story concrete houses in Remuera. You're seeing like small wooden batch-like buildings that aren't going to be worth anywhere near as much, that are in low-lying areas. And it's just beginning to annoy me, all these people going on and on and on about it's not that bad. It's not that bad for you. Just as we used to say in the sporting world, look at the scoreboard, Leo. It's really bad for lots of people. Surely.
It's empathy.
Yeah.
Those people lack empathy. It's the ability to put your mind in someone else's position. To sort of go, oh, well, yeah, I do have all of these privileges. And sure, like maybe you worked hard for it, whatever. It's not the point. The point is somebody else is not sharing your experience.
Yeah.
I think you touched on it, if someone's living hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck, doesn't have a lot in the cupboard, the fact that their power's out, their fridge is down, and they need to go and buy some food immediately.
Yeah.
That can be impossible for some people. And if some of these the far north has a lot of people living in poverty, they'll be hurting real quick.
I mean, even thinking about what you've just said to do with power being down, having gas to your house is a privilege of the wealthy. Now, when I say the wealthy, I don't mean the mega wealthy. When I was in Auckland living in Tarangi, we had gas to the house, right? But it's certainly not a privilege that the lowest of the low income have with their gas stoves. So therefore, if our power went out and we had a gas stove, yeah, we couldn't use the electric lighter, but we could turn the gas on and we could put a match down to it and we could cook. You know, even little things like that. Chewy, you've been here and seen it. I've got a pretty good barbecue, you know. And I know that barbecues aren't necessarily a sign of the wealthy, but I've got a pretty good barbecue and a full gas bottle. If I lost power here, I'll be able to cook all that food up and eat for a few days. I guess what I'm saying is, and I'm not wealthy in the specs of rich people, but I am wealthy in the specs of the lowest, the poorest, who then also remember a lot of them need to find rent for this house that they still that they still rent, that is now flooded. So it's just, I'm getting tired.
And we saw some of that in Auckland, didn't we? People talking about rents going up because their insurance charges were going to go up. People talking about raising rents when the houses were still flooded. It's just makes me furious.
Look, there are some people in the chat. There are some people in the chat
balanced out by watching a few mansions tumble off a cliff.
Yeah, but there are some people in the chat making some points. Look, Mark's made some points as well about this, and this is happening. Absolutely, 100%. This is happening, but you know, anecdotal evidence, as we always say, may not be representative of the overall data. I would say if you looked at all the houses that are getting damaged right now, I think it's pretty clear that the wealthy and the wealthy areas are being less impacted by the lower socioeconomic areas in general. Yes, there are some wealthy houses disappearing. I get it. That's true. That's hard for those people. But also, if you have means and you have wealth, probably that wealthy house you have on the cliff is also well insured, that you will get paid for and go and buy another wealthy house. If you are living in, I'm picking on Ranui, not for any particular reason, but suburb in your area that's not quite so well off, and you're renting and your house gets destroyed, you might have contents insurance if you can afford it, but then you've got no house and no contents, and you have to go find another one. And as Chewy has just said, and actually we're going to get to this when we play this clip from Newstalk ZB, rents are just starting to go up, and you have to go find another place where the rents are now higher. And remember, you're going to find another place where the rents are going higher at a time where the housing stock might have just lost 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 houses, which means it's going to be harder to get another house. If your clifftop mansion in Takapuna has just tumbled into the sea, I'm genuinely sorry for you. But then you get a fat check for $5 million from AMI Insurance or something, and you go and buy another house, and you're okay. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So both are sad. Both are sad. Like both are tragic for that family. But the wealthy, the group with means, still comes out of it a lot better, even okay, than the one without. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. If people aren't well off, I'll tell you the first thing that's on the chopping block: insurance.
Sure. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, 100%. Any type of insurance, if you haven't got enough money to go around, that's the first thing on the chopping block.
Yeah. So it's okay. It's okay. You can be an and/or, right? You can say, yes, it's sad that wealthy landowner, homeowner lost their house off the cliff. I agree with you. It would be devastating. I agree 100%. But you can also go, but they'll be okay. You know, they'll be financially okay. You know, finances, yes, you know, what money doesn't buy happiness, but it certainly buys choice, and it certainly brings freedom. If you don't have to worry about security, if you don't have to worry about where the power bill is getting paid for or where the food bill is getting paid for. I mean, we've even seen it in the story tonight about that family coming down from north of Whangarei, having to come down in the weather to get food because they're without power, and they went to the Forestry because they had to. Again, if you're in a house and you've got means and you've got resources and you've got backup food, and even if you're out of power, you've got a shit ton of pasta because you're a hippie, and you've got all sorts of stuff in your cupboard, dry food and stuff, you're probably okay. You know, it's a very different life for people with means and people without. And when these sorts of things happen, when tragedies happen, it's always the people without that are the worst impacted. It doesn't mean necessarily they lose the most financially, but they always come out the other end far worse off.
Yeah.
I've been
100%.
banging on. Is there stuff that we want to see in the chat, or should we get into this?
I'm going to chuck up an interesting point. I saw a tweet sort of along the same lines earlier today as well. Ava here says the problem is how little the reality of changing climate is factored in how we run things or plan. Industrial sites containing awful chemicals located near the rivers are a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, true.
And I want you to think wherever you are now, think about the industrial area in the towns that you are. I guarantee you it will be on flat, low-lying area next to a river or next to the sea.
It was right. What's in the place? It's all Ravens. It's Ravensbourne in Dunedin. That's got that fertilizer place literally on the harbour.
Fertilizer place. There is the fuel is down that area by the stadium. Where I grew up in Timaru, the entire industrial area is on a floodplain next to the Washtake River. It is astoundingly just universal. And when the water comes up and goes through those areas, that's where it goes. It goes in the water, and that's why they tell you not to wade around in floodwaters.
So let's hide Ava. So this is Dunedin Harbour for people who don't know. Beautiful place that it is. And right here where my arrow is, this is an area called Ravensbourne. And these plants here is what we're talking about. There you go. Look at the there's a quarry right here. This is actually quite high off the ground though, but this here is a massive plant that does fertilizer and all sorts of horrific things, smells, stinks, you know. Not many people actually like it, and is literally on the harbour, the Dunedin harbour. There it is. So it comes in, and that's not even our port. Our port is up here. There's our port there, going out to the sea. So, yeah. So you're right. I mean,
yeah, actually, a really good point here. Exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Go to South Dunedin.
Okay. I'm just doing this carefully. I'm doing this carefully so you don't see the pin where my house is. Yeah, there you go.
So there's South Dunedin, right? An incredibly dense part of Dunedin, densely populated, densely housed.
Yeah. So for people, hang on, let's just do this. For reference point, people will know St Clair. St Clair is kind of a flashy area. St Clair is here, down in sort of the southernmost point. This is St Clair Beach. It goes along into St Kilda. So this is sort of the beachy part of it. And this is the start of the harbour here. The harbour goes out there. So it's on the other side of the harbour. Sometimes people get confused because of where Dunedin is. See, this is where Dunedin is. It goes around like that. So we're down here. This is St Clair down here. So it actually goes around. So you can see that the harbour actually comes in from the north. And then it goes around the bottom. People sort of get confused with that sometimes. So we're down here. All right. Sorry, Sarah. I was just giving people a reference point.
Yeah.
So you're in South Dunedin.
So South Dunedin is flat and low.
Yep.
It got hit by a really bad flood in 2015.
Yep.
And a lot of time and effort went into researching what would happen in another flood or as sea level rises and that sort of thing. The groundwater is generally only, or the water table is 30 centimeters below the ground.
Right.
So on a king tide, people's backyards flood. I used to live in that area, and it did. King tide and full moon, it would flood. That is also Dunedin's industrial area.
Yeah, well, there's sort of
well.
There's
and
sort
that's
of
all on reclaimed land as well.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about how we have planned our urban areas and our industrial areas, this is what we're dealing with now. On the beach, there is or near the beach in the sand dunes, there is an old landfill. And a lot of towns would have put their landfills on a riverbed. We saw that in the West Coast a couple of years back as well. So, yeah, towns all across the country will have these issues to deal with climate change.
The thing that's scariest about South Dunedin as well, and I know this because I was doing some work for ODT in 2015 when this all happened, is the ground is actually sinking every year as the water level rises every year. So South Dunedin's actually doing this. And that's going to eventually meet up, and it will be a must. There's a plan. I should bring it up. It's quite this is a racecourse, Forbury Park. This has been sold. There's actually a plan by someone. I don't know how serious it is to turn this into a body of water, and to bring water.
I think that was an April Fool's thing.
I think it's brilliant. If it is,
they were going to turn it into like housing, but with canals, like Venice.
Bring it in through here. That'd be fantastic. I actually think it was really good. But what Dunedin probably needs is actually some kind of canal that goes through from there to there. to actually have the water be able to be moved more freely through, because what happens is then there's a path for it to go. So when Dunedin flooded in 2015, when South Dunedin flooded, it was mostly because of the stormwaters all being blocked up, which obviously is a council problem, and hopefully that's been somewhat mitigated. But yeah, if we get other big ones, then and again, so just to come back to the point that we started this rant on, that's where the people of less means typically buy and live in Dunedin, in South Dunedin. And the reason they live there is because the houses are cheaper, and the reason the houses are cheaper is because they flood. So right back to my first point about those with means like Kate Hawkesby and Leo Molloy, they don't get to see what other people get to see, because they don't live in areas that are flood prone, because they have wealth and they have privilege and they have the ability to get out of the way when the storms come through. Other people
they'd
don't.
never be within 300 meters of the people that live in South Dunedin, or the poorer parts of Auckland. Yeah, I'm just sick of hearing from them. Absolutely sick of hearing from them.
So we should stop talking about them?
I wouldn't go that far, but it does make me angry.
Some tweets here before we go on to the story from Newstalk ZB.
Yeah, sure.
Messages. Did I say tweets? I meant messages. Any message you want to share?
Oh, yes. Cookie Nick here points out Seaview and Lower Hutt.
Yep.
Another big industrial area with a lot of fuel storage, I think, which is nice. Nice to think about. And Rob points out massive raven spawn plant in Hawke's Bay, right on the waterfront, very close to flooded rivers. So that's good as well.
The way to possibly think about this in a really serious way is when the tsunami hit Japan in the last 5 or 6 years. Nuclear power plant caused devastation. Now, obviously, that's different because it is a huge amount of water coming from the sea and pushing things over and not being able to stop. But, that's what those floods are, going down the river on some much more minor way. So, and I don't disagree with you, Chewy, about how we've been planning our spaces. But what I will say is, we had a conversation last week, week and a half ago, with a scientist who talked about spongy cities. The way we're beginning to plan now is slightly different from how we have planned in the past. So I'm not saying it's a sorted done deal, but it seems that the way people are planning kind of from now forward, councils, individuals building, that kind of is different from when they planned to build South Dunedin on reclaimed land, 180 years ago. So some things are coming.
And nobody's got a crystal ball, and there's no way that they would have known that this was a thing. But it's more something that we need to think about now.
All right. Let us go to Newstalk ZB, shall we? Unless there's anything else you want to throw up very quick.
Real quick, Gareth H. The whole argument that it's just raining more is, I think, why they changed the term from global warming to climate change. There was a lot of talk about that. Global warming. Oh, well, why are we having this winter storm? That sort of thing. It's not. Well, I mean, it is a general warming of the climate.
But some individual places aren't warming like other places are, but the climate is changing. And you're right, because what happens with the warming is it creates, if more heat evaporates more water into the air, it dumps more water elsewhere. So that's changing the climate. It's making the world wetter as well.
There's our comparison, right? The damage that Cyclone Gabrielle did was mainly through wind damage.
Yeah.
It didn't bring an enormous amount of water.
Right.
And here we are 30, 40 years later, we have an enormously wet cyclone because our atmosphere has got hotter and wetter because our oceans are warming up. So that's what we're dealing with.
Speaking of wetter, happy Valentine's Day, by the way. Right. Let's move on. A very quick story here from Newstalk ZB, but it's one of those ones where I think it's always good for us to be on top of what the latest news is. And the headline from Newstalk ZB is food price inflation wasn't as high as predicted. Still going up, still high, but the economist Sharon Zollner from ANZ, not delivering necessarily good news, but delivering for real news, and maybe at least we can hear from her and not have to read the headline, which might come from it when they take one sentence that she said about a negative and the rest being not too bad. So remember saying earlier that if the National Party starts to lose some of their talking points, i.e. if petrol prices come down, if inflation comes down, if food price inflation isn't as high as predicted, then they lose a weapon that they've been banging on about for a long time, just like the GOP has done in America when it comes to gas prices. So let's have a listen to what Sharon Zollner, ANZ Chief Economist, had to say on News Talk ZB this afternoon.
Heather Duplessis-Allen.
Right, to other news, we've got figures out today. Food inflation is still climbing. House prices are still falling. With us now is ANZ's Chief Economist.
So note, first of all, how Duplessis-Allen sets it up, are still climbing. So you had an option here to pick two ways of saying this, are still climbing, or good news, not climbing as much as what expected. Of course, Duplessis-Allen went with still climbing. Got to paint it as a negative.
Economist Sharon Zollner. Hi, Sharon.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Is there any good news in these figures?
Well, the food price inflation wasn't quite as high as we expected, but offsetting that, of course, all sorts of trouble in food production, from the cyclone from Coomera to kiwi fruit to avocados to you name it. So I would say food prices had a good day, but yeah, on an annual basis, it did decline a little bit. Rents were interesting. The new tenancies data jumped quite strongly, but the stock of rentals not so much. But yeah, it's interesting to see those new rents lifting a little bit more than we expected.
So rents are going up.
So obviously, landlords are facing higher costs with higher mortgage rates. Perhaps they're trying their luck at passing some of those higher costs on.
Do you expect, so a 10% food prices inflation is still chugging along. Do you expect that it's going to go up or come back a wee bit in the future?
Well, we certainly hope it comes back at some point. We can't keep running at 10%, but the supply shocks just keep on coming.
So that's the point I was making earlier. She talks about the supply shocks just keep on coming. She listed all that food growth. She mentioned kiwi fruit and all these other plants that we grow and eat. And the economist is talking about supply shocks are coming. So therefore, supply shocks could be one of the things that are causing food prices and food price inflation to increase. And if you think about other things that have happened over the past 12 months, like the war in Ukraine, like supply shortage issues and that sort of thing, it seems pretty clear that the economist is referencing external forces, natural disasters being a pretty big driver as to what's happening in the economy at the moment. Anything, Chewy, or should we keep going?
No, keep going.
Talking about eggs or the weather. And yeah, so until we start seeing an end to that. But it is worth remembering that in terms of global food prices, which sort of drive the larger trends, New Zealand is on the right side of that overall, insofar as we produce a lot more food than we can eat. So it's good for national income. Of course, then some of that national income needs to be redistributed to help those who are really struggling to pay for their groceries.
Sharon, have we hit the bottom of the house price falls?
On our forecast, we're about 2/3 of the way through. So the fall in January wasn't quite as large, actually, as some of the falls we've seen. Perhaps that's the first impacts of the fact that immigration is lifting quite rapidly. But we suspect it's probably just noise, actually, and that we've got more to come. So we're picking a fall of -22%. We haven't actually changed that for a few months, which is quite something. For a while there, we just couldn't keep up with the move, falling steadily, but not in an alarming kind of way.
So 22% is what they're picking for house prices to drop. So therefore, if you had $1 million house, then it's going to be $780. If you've got a $500,000 house, it's going to be, let's say, $400. That's what they're predicting. I think I've probably seen, I looked at it the other day on One Roof, my property. I've probably seen, what would it be? I've probably seen 20%, according to One Roof, on my place at the moment. So maybe, and the other thing is when you see there's a 22% drop, what typically happens is the bigger areas, Auckland, Queenstown, Wellington, Christchurch first, probably Hamilton, Tauranga in there as well, they might drop 30%. Smaller places, Te Puke, places Manawatu, Palmerston North, they'll drop 10%. And places like maybe Dunedin, cities about our size, sort of in the middle, who are metros but aren't big metros, will probably be about that average. So big cities more, little towns less. Places like us, Invercargill, these sorts of places, maybe more in that average 20-ish%, Timaru, Waimaru, those sorts of places. So from that, food prices increase rates not as high as predicted. Supply shocks in the food stocks. New Zealand's on the right side of the food issues in the world. Rents have gone up, and house prices, they reckon, have dropped about 2/3 of what they're going to drop. That was the report, which I actually think is probably it's probably a C+ in the old school. It's probably an achieved in the NCEA. It's not good, but it's not terrible.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen the house prices go down, and as Mark G in the chat says, I thought we wanted the house prices to fall. I certainly want my kids to be able to afford one. Yes, seed Mark, but you've fallen into a trap there. You're thinking about other people. Even if there are other people that you've made, you're still thinking about other people, which is, of course, wrong.
The argument,
You've got to think about yourself.
The argument always goes
portfolio.
Yeah, it always goes cyclically, though, doesn't it? Like for people who own houses, they want other people to be able to get into the market, but not impact them, like you're saying, Chewy. But the other thing to remember about house prices falling, it wasn't very long ago that we were reporting that house prices were the least affordable they've been in 60 years. Because with the house prices falling, but the interest rates going up, houses aren't actually any more affordable than they were 5 or 10 years ago. So what's happened is what ends up happening is they haven't become more affordable to first-time buyers because of the interest rates, and a whole bunch of people who are using them for their investments and for their savings and their retirement have had a whole bunch whacked off their if you could do a trade that it became much more affordable for new home buyers to get into it, that would be like you'd be able to swallow that pill a lot easier than it's no more affordable for them to get into, and the 65-year-old who's about to retire has just lost a couple of $100,000 out of their retirement scheme. There seems just to be lose-lose. There's no win there at all for anybody, really. Although I do sound like a selfish homeowner when I say that, but I'm just being real. You know, if there's no win for it, there's no win for anyone in the housing market right now with interest rates being so high. Really, there's not. All right. Is there anything else you want to throw up there before we head off? Because we're pretty much done for the night.
Yep. David points out supermarkets are under pressure from the New Zealand Commerce Commission to keep food prices low or risk further intervention. So they're doing so by screwing the growers and the suppliers. Yes, because you wouldn't want them to cut their margins, would you?
Yeah, very much so. All right. How do we get rid of that comment? You can get rid of that comment. Big thanks to our patrons. And also, if you want to be involved with the show, if you want to help us to continue to make this show, then you can head to patreon.com/big hairy news. All our people up there who are already on board, who are helping us out heaps. We appreciate you all to bits. And if you also want to help us, I think the cheapest plan is only $5. I think coffee runners are only $5. Fuel is $8. I think patron might be 15, and super patron might be 35, and producer might be 50, and there are some other ones as well. But that's what we've got at the moment. We've got a bunch of people on board. It's actually really nice. I actually should we look at this? I'm like, look at all those lovely people. It wasn't until I wrote it out into a slide. I'm like, wow. Well, these people supporting us, it's when you put their names into a list like that, it's really nice to see the group of people who have got behind us early on to say, we like what you're doing, keep on doing it.
And as I've said, very good looking group of people.
Yes, very, very good looking.
Just well put together.
And so what you're saying, Chewy, is if people come on board and become patrons, they become better looking as well.
We haven't been doing this long enough to really put a hard number on it, but I would say easily 28%.
Well, at least 22%. You might lose 22% on your house, but if you then support us, you probably gain 22% in.
You're right. We are a better investment than a house. That's correct.
Well, at least we're not losing value. We're not losing value at the moment. We may not be gaining value, but we're not losing value at the moment. All right, team. What is it today? So tomorrow afternoon, if you're interested, 4:35, I'll send a tweet out to remind y'all. I'll be on Today FM on their panel, talking the issues of the day with Lloyd Burr. Speaking of Lloyd Burr, we'll chase up that commentary from today to do with our mate, the man who constantly uses racist rhetoric, as we spelled out very clearly last night. And other than that, I guess we're pretty much done for the day, and we will see you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Now, remember, Friday night, Chewy, did you get that email I just sent you earlier?
Yes, I did.
So Friday night, Byron Clark is going to be on. Help me out here. Is it called Fear? Chewy and I have just been sent Byron's book, and I'm going to have a look at it. Shall I put up the first page so everyone can have a look at it? Here it is. Here, Byron C. Clark is one of Aotearoa New Zealand's foremost experts on the far right and alt-right extremism. He is also an independent video essayist, disinformation researcher, and commentator. He lives in Christchurch, New Zealand. The book is called Fear. Look, I'll bring it across. I will show you this because this is some of the imagery from the book. We can have a look at that. No one's going to get a look. There you go. Fear, Byron C. Clark. So Byron's going to be joining us. Oh, look, I'll even animate it for you. Byron will be joining us on Friday night. That'll be the show, the whole show, however long Byron stays with us, really. An hour or so, 45 minutes or an hour. It means my little dyslexic ass has to start reading because it'll take me a very long time to read all that, but I'm going to give it a good crack. Chewy, you've got a copy of it as well. And other than that, oh, look at this. I think our very first super sticker. Very nice. Thank you very much.
I'm going to say that's a little Valhood because we get the little sticker. It doesn't show up on the screen, but it's a Valhood giving me a thumbs up.
Oh, very good. All right. Thank you very much. We will be here. So that's a reminder for tomorrow afternoon on Today FM. Friday night, Byron's going to be in studio. How do we say this? We're remote. In the room with us.
On the
in
show.
the room where it happens, on the show. And other than that, back tomorrow night for another show. I'm imagining we'll be wrapping up what's happening with the weather, what's happening around the country. If you are in a place that's still getting impacted or has been impacted, please be careful, please be safe. We want to see you back here tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Love you all to bits, and we will catch you then. Thank you, Chewy. Thank you, ball boys. Thank you, umpires. And we'll see you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Hooroo.